This is you, Lieutenant Marcos Valdez, operator with the Special Forces Airmobile Group. It's 3:14 in the morning on Wednesday, December 4th. You're wearing tactical gear weighing over 44 pounds. You're hooked to a fast rope line, and below your boots, there are 100 feet of black air before you touch down in the Chiapas jungle. The Black Hawk helicopter vibrates as it descends silently toward what military intelligence has designated the Southern Eden, a 200 million peso ranch that officially doesn't exist, protected by 62 armed gunmen carrying rifles capable of bringing down the aircraft you're sitting in. You have 90 seconds from the moment your feet hit the ground before the fight begins. There's no margin for error. One wrong move, and you don't make it out of this jungle alive. What we're going to explore today is not a glorification of violence or a celebration of any side. It's a documented analysis of the largest tactical operation carried out in the southeastern part of the country in recent years, and of what authorities found when they finally managed to enter a property that organized crime considered impenetrable. Let's start with what made this ranch so special. Why the Jalisco New Generation Cartel invested so heavily in a property located 24 miles from Tapachula, deep in the Chiapas jungle, far from their traditional territories in western Mexico. The location was no coincidence. Chiapas shares a border with Guatemala, and Guatemala serves as the most important receiving point for South American cocaine entering Mexico by land. The drugs leave South America, cross Central America, and need an entry point into Mexican territory. Roughly 4 years ago, the cartel decided it needed its own gateway in the southeast. The ranch was acquired through a network of shell companies registered in Guatemala and tax havens. Frontmen with no criminal records who appeared as legal owners. The original property was about 1,200 acres, officially registered as an agro-industrial project. Everything perfectly legal on paper. Just another cattle ranch in a region full of cattle ranches. During the first year, that's exactly what it looked like. But gradually, the transformation began. And what they built over the following 3 years exceeds what most people can imagine when they think of organized crime properties. The main mansion has 5 levels, built with Italian marble floors. Finishes on par with multi-millionaire residences in the most exclusive neighborhoods of Mexico City. An infinity pool with a panoramic view toward the Guatemalan jungle, an industrial kitchen capable of feeding 50 people, and on the 4th level, something that has become a symbol of this operation. A golden throne with the initials of the cartel's top leader engraved on the backrest. Not an executive chair, a throne. The kind of furniture we normally associate with medieval kings installed in the middle of the Chiapas jungle as a declaration of absolute power. Hit like if you didn't expect something like this to exist on Mexican soil. But the mansion was only the visible part. What truly made this property invaluable was underground and in the peripheral facilities. The private airstrip measures just under 3/4 of a mile in length, fully operational with lighting for nighttime landings. And on that strip, investigators found 2 aircraft that by themselves are worth more than many legitimate Mexican companies. The first is a Gulfstream, the type of aircraft used by heads of state and multinational corporate executives. The interior was lined in gold and ostrich leather. Estimated value, 1 billion pesos. The second aircraft is a Bombardier Global with a flight range of about 8,700 miles, capable of flying from Chiapas to Europe non-stop, valued at 1.6 billion pesos. When the operators opened the cargo compartment, they found 8 180 pounds of cocaine that hadn't yet been unloaded from the last flight. One of the captured pilots provided information that puts the scale of what was happening into perspective. Both planes had made 14 direct flights to Texas and California in the last 45 days, an average of one flight every 3 days, crossing the border with shipments, landing on clandestine airstrips on American soil. A logistical operation that ran with the regularity of a commercial airline, except it transported cocaine instead of passengers. Beneath a structure that looked like an agricultural warehouse, operators found the tunnel entrance. Just over a mile of professionally excavated tunnel, crossing the border and emerging on Guatemalan soil. Walls reinforced with concrete, a permanent electric lighting system, rails for transporting heavy cargo, and a ventilation system. The kind of infrastructure that requires engineers and years of construction. And that's exactly what they found in the warehouses. 10 metric tons of pure cocaine, 22,000 pounds packed in bricks stamped with the cartel's brand. The street value comes out to 5.6 billion pesos. That's equivalent to the entire annual budget of several Mexican municipalities combined. It was the largest shipment ever documented in the southeastern part of the country. And then there was the underground vault. Reinforced concrete walls over 3 feet thick, a steel door that required specialized equipment to open. When they finally got in, they found $42 million in cash. Not pesos, dollars. Fresh bills packed in bundles, stacked floor to ceiling. Tell me in the comments if you ever imagined vaults like this existed on Mexican soil. The seized arsenal reveals the defensive intentions of those who operated this ranch. 840 long guns of various calibers. But the most alarming find was 28 Barrett .50 caliber rifles, capable of taking down helicopters. They also found 9 anti-aircraft rocket launchers of Russian and American manufacture. Those who operated the ranch had anticipated an aerial assault and were prepared to defend themselves with firepower equivalent to a small military force. The personnel guarding all of this were no ordinary hitmen. 62 permanent members divided into around-the-clock shifts. All of them wore cloned uniforms of the Mexican Special Forces Air Mobile groups. They carried radios configured to military frequencies. Several were deserters from Mexican and Central American armed forces. This was the fortress that military intelligence had identified. In early September, analysts from the Secretariat of National Defense were conducting routine satellite surveillance over jungle areas of Chiapas. In the images of a zone located 24 miles from Tapachula, they detected something that shouldn't exist. An airstrip, where officially there was none. Large structures that didn't appear in any records. What had once been a simple cattle ranch had become a fortified compound. Simultaneously, informants in Guatemala reported shipment movements toward the Chiapas border. Informants in Jalisco confirmed that the cartel had established a major base in the southeast. The pieces started connecting. During October and November, surveillance intensified. Permanent satellite monitoring, communications intercepts, infiltration of informants into nearby towns. They detected the tunnel through thermal imaging that showed temperature differences consistent with an underground structure. If you're enjoying this analysis, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. By late November, intelligence had enough information to act. But they also had a significant problem. 62 gunmen with heavy weaponry, including anti-armor rifles and rocket launchers. A remote location in dense jungle. 7 different escape routes. And the occupants had equipment to intercept military frequencies. Commanders decided they needed a massive air-mobile assault. A surprise attack from the air with force so overwhelming it would neutralize their response capability before they could organize a defense or escape. They decided to deploy 320 operators. The night of December 3rd into the 4th, everything was set. At 2 in the morning, 14 helicopters lifted off from military bases. Black Hawks and Cougars designed for tactical insertion into hostile territory. Simultaneously, 40 armored trucks and 8 weaponized vehicles departed along different routes. They maintained total radio silence. The helicopters flew in nap-of-the-earth formation over the jungle, so low that the trees nearly brushed the landing skids. At 3:14 in the morning, the descent began. The 14 helicopters appeared simultaneously from different directions. On the ranch, the night shift gunmen detected the sound of rotors. For a few seconds, there was confusion. The noise was coming from everywhere. Some thought they were friendly aircraft. Others immediately understood what was happening. The operators began fast roping down, 320 personnel touching ground in under 90 seconds. Simultaneously, the ground vehicles reached all 7 access points. They sealed every exit with armored vehicles in position. The ranch was completely surrounded before the gunmen could mount a coordinated response. At 3:19 in the morning, the firefight began. The gunmen opened fire from multiple positions. They had heavy weaponry, defensive positions, training, but they were facing a force 5 times their size with real elite training. Not cloned uniforms, not tactics copied from videos. Operators who had spent years preparing for exactly this type of situation. The teams advanced methodically. Coordinated formations covering every angle. Defensive positions neutralized one by one. Tactical superiority applied with surgical precision. The firefight lasted exactly 7 minutes. By 3:26 in the morning, organized resistance had ceased. 58 gunmen neutralized, 4 captured alive. The operators did not suffer a single casualty. 0 friendly losses against 62 defenders armed with Barrett rifles and rocket launchers. The first team entered the main mansion. 5 levels cleared, room by room. On the 4th level, the main office. And there it was, the throne. A golden chair with the leader's initials engraved on the backrest. One of the operators flipped it over, pulled out a can of black spray paint, and wrote a phrase that's now circulating across the entire country. The king no longer has a palace. He signed it with the date and the unit's initials. By 9:25 in the morning, the operation had concluded. The final inventory became a national trending topic. 10 metric tons of pure cocaine, publicly incinerated. 2 aircraft valued at 3 billion pesos, under military custody. 840 long guns, including 28 Barrett rifles and 9 rocket launchers. $42 million in cash. A cross-border tunnel permanently sealed. A ranch valued at 200 million pesos seized. One of the detainees was the cartel leader's personal pilot. Known as El Tigre, he decided to cooperate. He confirmed the 14 flights to Texas and California. He provided specific routes, contacts in the United States, methods for evading radar. And he provided information about other cartel properties that will likely be targets of future operations. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the magnitude of what happened. During the press conference, a lieutenant colonel delivered the line that went viral. He stated that their luxury transportation was over, and that now they'd have to walk. The cartel that flaunted aircraft valued at amounts equivalent to the budgets of entire hospitals had lost everything in one early morning. The airstrip was destroyed with controlled explosives. Over 300 feet of asphalt turned into unusable craters. Years of investment eliminated in minutes. The message was deliberate. Seizing isn't enough. You have to destroy the operational capability. For the cartel, the loss is catastrophic. Direct financial losses exceeding 10 billion pesos. Loss of a logistics corridor that took years to establish. Loss of the cross-border tunnel that required massive investment. Loss of 62 operatives who knew the complete structure of the operation. And loss of documentation that will enable additional operations. The Golden Throne flipped over, with a spray-painted phrase captures something fundamental. For years, those who operated this ranch lived convinced they were beyond the reach of authorities. They invested 200 million pesos because they believed the remote location, the armed gunmen, the cloned uniforms made them invulnerable. They installed a throne because they were convinced this was a kingdom no one could touch. And in 7 minutes, 320 operators proved them wrong. The paradox of organized crime fortresses is that they require ostentation to function as symbols of power, but the ostentation makes them detectable. The aircraft left records that were traced. The airstrip was visible from satellites. Vehicle movement generated patterns that intelligence learned to recognize. Their very success created the evidence that led to their destruction. The Southern Eden no longer exists. 10 metric tons of cocaine were turned to ash. 2 planes that crossed the border with impunity are under military custody. A tunnel that took years to build was permanently sealed. A golden throne lies flipped over, with a phrase that sums up everything that happened. What this early morning demonstrated is that when there is institutional will, adequate resources, and precise intelligence, fortresses that seemed untouchable can fall in minutes. If you made it this far, you now have a complete perspective on how the biggest operation of the year in southeastern Mexico was carried out. You won't find this kind of analysis in surface-level headlines. If you want to keep getting informed on topics that require depth and context, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next video. See you soon.